Hello, welcome to another episode of Field Screams Podcast. Today we'll be covering Nightmare on Elm Street, the original made in 1984. This film was written and directed by Wes Craven, and it's actually, supposedly, based on a true story. So the true story part of it, Wes Craven actually found an article in the LA Times about a family who escaped the killing fields in Cambodia. They moved to the U.S., and this is a direct quote from Wes Craven. He said, "Things were fine, and then suddenly the young son was having very disturbing nightmares. He told his parents he was afraid that if he slept, the thing chasing him would get him, so he tried to stay awake for days at a time. When he finally fell asleep, his parents thought the crisis was over. Then they heard screams in the middle of the night. By the time they got to him, he was dead. He died in the middle of a nightmare. Here was a youngster having a vision of horror that everyone older was denying. That became the central line of Nightmare on Elm Street." There's a lot of speculation on what actually made the young boy die in this family. Some people speculate that it's like the major shift in culture of going from Cambodia to the U.S. It was messing with him. He wasn't getting his sleep. You know, when you don't get a lot of sleep, you might get a little manic. I don't know. But it is a really weird tale. And I mean, like, this weird real-life story drew inspiration for this exact movie we're talking about. So let's talk about this actual movie. The beginning, you know, it starts with Tina in her dream. Tina Gray, I think, is her full name. You know, she's walking around in this boiler room, and like it kind of shows like little glimpses of Freddy. It doesn't completely show him, like later sequels will, but this movie does a good job of kind of having Freddy play in the shadows a bit. You know, like they show an emphasis on that knife glove, which is just fantastic. It looks like something you can build in Fallout. The first glimpse we see of Freddy Krueger, though, as she's walking down the alley, you know, if you're not really familiar, if you know who Freddy Krueger is and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go back and watch the first one, and you don't have a lot of memories of it, you know, you're like, okay, I can't wait till Freddy Krueger jumps out. But the first glimpse you get is like Mr. Fantastic Freddy Krueger. You know, he has like 20-foot arms, and it's actually really well shot. It's like a silhouette of him, and he's just laughing. He has his gloves scraping on the side of the building. It's a really great shot, especially for its time. But I mean, I think it stands even today. Tina, when she sees him, she's like, "Oh my god." Then it does a zoom in on Freddy, and he holds up his glove. You know, again, they knew what they had. They knew the knife glove was just a home run. And Freddy Krueger replies,
"This is God,"
which is just a fantastic line. They show us a glimpse of, you know, what happens in the nightmare happens in real life by when Freddy kind of slashes Tina's sweater, vest, shirt, whatever you want to call it. When she wakes up, you know, there's actually the slash marks in the clothing, which kind of sets up the lore of what the franchise becomes. You know, when you dream, you have a nightmare, and if he kills you in the dream, then you're dead in real life. They could have easily just killed Tina off right from the get-go, like a lot of horror movies do it. You know, you start off with a boy or a girl, they're wandering around during nighttime, and then, you know, the big bad figure comes, kills them, you know, and it starts the tempo right from the get-go. But they did like kind of a good job of letting her live so that we can see the other characters that we're going to follow around for the rest of the movie. You know, Tina's best friend is Nancy. Nancy is played by Heather Langenkamp, which we will see a few more times in this franchise, which is a good thing. Besides Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger, I think you could say that Heather Langenkamp is kind of the star of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Each time she's brought back, it doesn't feel forced. You know, we just covered Halloween, and to me, there's sometimes I feel like when they bring back Jamie Lee Curtis, it feels a little forced. You know, they're kind of redoing timelines, they're retconning stuff. In Nightmare on Elm Street, like, they don't really do that. They do it in really creative ways. We also meet the character Glenn, who is Nancy's boyfriend. Glenn is played by Johnny Depp. And man, Glenn is an extremely loyal boyfriend. I mean, during this whole ordeal, you know, he goes to Tina's house, he sits around, talks with them. Tina's boyfriend Rod shows up, which he's a greaser, and he kind of seems obnoxious. I mean, like, one of the first things he said, he's like, "What are we doing? Having an orgy here?" And, like, no one really laughs, and they're like, "Oh, Rod." But then, like, Tina and Rod, they go upstairs, and they clearly start to bang. And Glenn kind of looks over at Nancy, and he, like, tries to make a move, and Nancy's like, "No, we're here for Tina." And if you're Glenn, you're kind of like, "Well, what's Tina doing? Like, come on." But Glenn doesn't complain. He's a very loyal boyfriend. I mean, there's even a moment he goes outside when they think they hear something. He's like, "Whoever's out there, I'm going to punch your lights out." And Glenn's not a very big dude, but he tries to be the protector. He tries to be just a very good boyfriend. So good for Glenn. Now, eventually Tina falls asleep. And when she does, like, this is like the first kill of the movie. And it is one of the best kills. It's one of the most iconic kills. Literally, Freddy Krueger carries Tina up the wall, drags her across the ceiling, and they did this by doing a rotating room and strapping down all the furniture and stuff. It is, man, it holds up today. Like, just watching it, like, blood flying everywhere, Rod screaming, like, what the heck? Like, and what do you do if your girlfriend's being dragged up a wall and across the ceiling? Like, you know, just being stabbed by an invisible force. There's really nothing you could do. The best you could do is probably exactly what Rod did, is yell, scream for help, and then when people run in, you know, you're so scared, you run away, which is exactly what Rod did. I don't blame him. Another thing I kind of like that I feel like the movie doesn't get enough credit for is when Rod takes off, like, it kind of sets up this interesting dynamic. It doesn't go too far with it, but I mean, Nancy's dad, Lieutenant Thompson, you know, obviously he's trying to figure out what's going on. They even question Nancy. And Nancy's mom, you know, who's just an alcoholic, she's a flawed character, to say the least. It seems like she has an alcoholic drink in every scene she's in. You know, they do it on purpose. Because, of course, she needs to ignore Nancy's pleas, you know, that something's going on. And, you know, everyone older than her just does not buy it. So the teens got to kind of try to unite and fight this evil entity, whatever you want to call Freddy Krueger. So yeah, Rod ends up being the fall guy for Lieutenant Thompson. They end up arresting him, which, I mean, he was on the scene while she was being killed. You know, what else do you do if you're a cop in that situation? I mean, girl gets murdered. The only person in that room was her boyfriend. Nancy and Glenn were the only witnesses. I mean, there's really not a whole lot you can suspect. You know, it's clearly a murder. There's blood everywhere. You know, how would Rod drag her across the wall and ceiling? I don't know. And Lieutenant Thompson probably doesn't know either. But he needs to find a reason for this murder. Nancy starts dreaming. And I mean, one of the first ones, it happens when she's in the classroom. And it's a really well done scene. She sees Tina, like, in a body bag. And man, again, I keep saying these scenes hold up well, but this scene holds up really well too. Even rewatching, I'm like, man, that is legit creepy. And then, like, an invisible force, like, dragging her body away. Very well done. You know, then she runs into the hall monitor, which our hall monitor is even a thing anymore. It wasn't when I was in school. But, you know, you always kind of see in these old movies, like, there's the hall monitor walking around and, hey, where's your hall pass? Like, but anyways, you know, she asked Nancy for her hall pass, and Nancy's like, screw your hall pass. And then the girl turns around with, like, Freddy's glove and kind of taunts her. Eventually, Nancy follows a trail of blood for some reason. You would think that'd be a bad idea. You've already seen your dead best friend in a body bag. The hall monitor has a knife glove, which you've said you've had dreams of before, which so did Tina, and she ended up dying. So I don't know why you follow this trail of blood. I mean, what are you going to do when you find your dead friend? But anyway, she does. She finds herself in the boiler room, and then we see Freddy Krueger, a full glimpse of him. And he cuts open his nipple, and there's, like, maggots inside of it. It's really gross. You know, Freddy Krueger goes towards her, and he's making these weird motions with his tongue, going like, ah, da, 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 da. And he almost strikes her, but Nancy burns herself on the hot pipe, which wakes her up. But there's a burn mark on her arm, so Nancy knows what happens in the dream happens in real life. Okay, there's this scene where Freddy's glove is, like, coming out of the bath water because she falls asleep while taking a bath, which isn't a good idea. Nancy's mom even warns her. She's like, people have been drowning from falling asleep in the bathtub. And Nancy's like, whatever, Mom. And she goes back to bed in the bathtub. But yeah, Freddy's Krueger, it comes out of the water, and it's between Nancy's legs, which is very invasive, I guess you could say. Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing like privacy in a shower or in a bath. And when you see the scene, you're kind of like, oh, dear God, please don't, Freddy. But I know there's kind of the argument, some people, I guess Wes Craven was gonna have Freddy Krueger be a child rapist. That was going to be part of his past, but they kind of did away with that aspect because there was a lot of stories in the national news about people actually doing that, and they're like, maybe it's not a good time. So they kind of did away with that little subplot, but you notice in later sequels, there's little hints at him doing that. And I think, these little scenes here, him approaching Nancy going, sticking his hand up between her legs in the bathtub, even the phone scene where there's a tongue hanging out, it's all very suggestive. So yeah, I'll just put that out there. Nancy decides to finally try to sleep again. She gets Glenn to be a lookout, but Glenn's not really buying it, even though Tina just got slashed up, and, they saw her slashed shirt before she got murdered. You would think Glenn would bite a little bit, but, I get it, this is a hard thing to swallow in real life, even with all the weird things, there's some people, they don't want to believe in the supernatural no matter what, you see in scary movies all the time. You could literally get a demon dragging someone down a hallway, and someone could be like, oh, I'm sure there's a perfect reason why that would happen. Maybe the window was open and the wind blew. They just wouldn't buy it no matter what. So, Glenn doesn't quite buy it. He falls asleep when he's on lookout, and it leads to a very good chase scene between Freddy and Nancy. Nancy goes to her house. Her stairs become marshmallow or toothpaste, which I think people said that was Bob Shaye's idea, the producer of it. And I guess Wes Craven wasn't too big of a fan of it, but I think it's a pretty good scene. And there's even a part where Freddy Krueger's impersonating Nancy's mom through the door window, and then finally he gets bored of it and he's like, I'm Freddy Krueger. Body Bag Tina comes back during the scene, and again, I swear this is the creepiest thing throughout the entire movies whenever Body Bag Tina shows up. She's got bugs coming out of her mouth, turns into eels. It's just really gross in general. Freddy's slashing up pillows, feathers are going everywhere. It looks like the typical old school, almost pillow fight, and he's about to kill Nancy, but her alarm clock wakes her up, and she kind of scolds Glenn for, not paying attention and not staying awake. Which, Glenn, I've been vouching for you this entire episode, and then you fall asleep on Nancy, come on. But again, I think it's just really, if you're in Glenn's shoes, I don't know. It would be a tough concept to digest, but again, he was there, so it's tricky. Freddy ends up killing Rod, and he makes him hang himself, which is a pretty good job, because, this is kind of Freddy's way of covering up his own crimes, which you don't. Sometimes in the later sequels, you don't really see. The police are like, oh, he committed suicide. And Nancy knows the true answer. But Freddy Krueger covered his tracks pretty well. Eventually, Nancy starts pleading to her mom and dad, listen, this guy in my dreams, he goes by Freddy Krueger. I need you to help me. And Marge is like, we need to get her some help. So when they take her to this little institution, they're doing these little experiments. And what baffles me is just, we gotta have the parents not believe Nancy. But Nancy literally in her dreams, she's getting kind of thrown around in bed, and when she wakes up, A, she has gray hair, B, she has slash marks on her arm, and C, she literally has Freddy Krueger's hat in her hands. And yet, they don't do anything. What do they do instead? Marge installs iron bars around their windows. Yeah, that's supposed to help. Nancy's all like, what the heck, Mom? Our house looks like a jail cell. So Marge is like, no, come here. Come downstairs. I'm going to tell you all I know about Freddy Krueger. Of course, Nancy's mad because she's been putting this entire time, and they're like, shut up, Nancy. It's just a dream. But then they're like, oh yeah, there was a serial killer named Freddy Krueger. Yeah, that hat you took from your dream, yeah, it does have his literal name written in it. Just in case Freddy Krueger lost it, he has his name in it so they could return it to him. So Marge explains that Freddy Krueger murdered over 20 kids. When they finally arrested him, a search warrant wasn't signed, or there was something wrong that happened in court, and Freddy Krueger was let off. So the townspeople, they got all mad. They trapped him in a warehouse. They burned it down with him inside. And what do you know? Marge took one of Freddy Krueger's weapons as a souvenir. And that souvenir is the glove with knives in it, which Marge had. Nancy was telling her about this man, and she was like blowing Nancy off completely. I don't know. It's like Marge is a terrible mom and makes terrible decisions in this film. So Nancy finally comes up with a plan to kill Freddy. It involves Glenn staying up, which we know is Glenn's Achilles heel. We all have that one friend that falls asleep way too quick. Glenn is that guy, and she specifically tells him, do not fall asleep. And Glenn's like, oh, don't worry, babe, I won't. And then he gets like his little like TV and headphones out, and then he falls asleep. Freddy Krueger takes care of him by sucking him in the bed, and then like creates a geyser of blood that shoots out of the bed onto the ceiling, onto the wall. I guess when they did this scene, it shocked a few crew members because it didn't go according to plan, and it made the whole rotating room go off to the side, which makes the blood shoot sideways. But it makes it looks really cool in this movie. It really does. And poor Glenn's mom opens up the door to see just all of Glenn's blood everywhere. It is a mess. Freddy Krueger did not cover up this kill. Imagine how dumb it would be if like Freddy Krueger like snuck a little bomb into Glenn's room, like trying to play it off like he blew himself up or something. Like, yeah, all that blood, like Glenn blew himself up. That's what happened. Like, it wasn't me. I've talked about how Freddy Krueger is very suggestive, but Nancy goes to call Glenn before he dies. And there is a part when she calls him, Freddy Krueger takes over the phone, and he goes, I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. And that's when the tongue comes out and it's like, blah, 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 blah. Again, another suggestive thing by Freddy Krueger. Just putting that out there. Nancy ends up going all home alone on Freddy Krueger. She sets up a bunch of traps. It leads to like the final confrontation. Nancy and her mom, they do kind of like talk to each other, and they kind of, put their problems to the side, even though it's a little too late. Marge already put up the iron bars and everything, and when Nancy's coming clean to her mom, Marge like, she takes her gigantic bottle of like vodka and like puts a cap on it, like as if like, okay, I've had enough. Even though she's like passed out from how much she's drank already. Like, I think it's supposed to like signal that Marge is finally done drinking. But of course Freddy comes back, and it leads to the big chase scene. And during this chase scene, Freddy... So there's a part in the basement where like Nancy pours gasoline on Freddy and lights him on fire, and then she like runs upstairs, and like Freddy's supposed to follow her. If you watch a behind the scenes documentary, I think it's called Never Sleep Again, they literally talk about this scene, and it absolutely cracks me up. So the stunt guy who plays Freddy Krueger in this scene, literally they're talking to him, and they're like, okay, listen, we're gonna light you on fire. What we want you to do is we want you to kind of go up the stairs. I think the directions were we need you just to run up the stairs like on fire. And the stunt guy's like, okay, I got it. And they're like, literally like, do it super quick, we'll put you out, like no big deal, just let's make it quick. And the guy's like, okay, I'll do it. So Nancy lights him on fire. Freddy, he kind of stumbles a bit. He takes his time, he gets to the stairs, he goes 3/4 of the way up the stairs, falls down the stairs, and literally when he falls down, he gets back up and goes back up the stairs again. Like, this dude way oversold what he was supposed to do. Like, this guy earned his pay completely, and I guess by the end of it, they're like, what the heck, man, like, you did a lot of extra stuff. All we wanted you to do was take like 5-6 steps. And the guy's like, yeah, but I wanted a really good shot. So, I mean, credit to this stunt guy who did the Freddy Krueger on fire scene. Knocked it out of the park. Eventually, Nancy's dad, Lieutenant Thompson, comes in. They both go upstairs, and they literally both see Freddy Krueger on fire, strangling Marge in bed. And then, Lieutenant Thompson throws a blanket over and puts the fire out. When he removes it, it's Marge's skeleton left. And her body, floats down into, an abyss, which is, part of the bed. And then the bed turns normal. And Nancy literally turns to look at her dad, and she's like, "Now do you believe me?" And it's kind of good for you, Nancy. Give him a little sass. Yeah, his wife just died. He didn't really get along with her too well. But, yeah, do you believe her now, Lieutenant Thompson? Once Lieutenant Thompson goes out the room, Freddy Krueger rises up out of the bed from underneath the sheet and kind of slashes it open. Another really cool entrance by Freddy. But this is where Nancy learns to dispose of Freddy. She looks him in the eyes and she's like, "I take back all of the energy that I gave to you. I'm not afraid of you. You don't exist." And she turns his back to Freddy, and that makes him go away. Literally, what a bold choice by Nancy. Imagine how bad it would be if Freddy just stabbed her in the back and killed her, and then the credits rolled. Wouldn't that be something? No, but Freddy disappears. It's kind of anticlimactic in a way, but it goes with the themes of, if you fear Freddy, it strengthens him. And then the movie ends with, this end credit scene where, Nancy, she walks out the door, her mom's alive, her friends are alive, they get into a car. The car is really just Freddy Krueger possessing the car. And then, Freddy Krueger grabs Marge and pulls her through the window of the door, which you can clearly tell it's a mannequin. It doesn't look the greatest. Really, the whole ending scene is not that great compared to the rest of the movie. But overall, it's a pretty solid movie. It's a classic for a reason. Freddy Krueger is actually scary here. He's not as funny as what he is in the later sequels. He's legit scary. He plays in the shadows, he cuts himself open, cuts off fingers, and manipulates reality because, of course, they're dreaming. And it's just an awesome concept in general. It's hard to beat. It's a super creative movie that sets off this outlandish franchise that goes on for tons of movies. It had its own sideshow. There's video games of Freddy Krueger. He was literally an icon in pop culture. And even the ideas that go around him, the little girls playing jump rope, singing 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. Great stuff. Yeah, I really like this movie. A lot of times, older movies, sometimes I'm it's alright. It did its job. It motivated other movies to be made. But I'm kind of meh about it. But this movie just rocks. It really does. So this has been my review for A Nightmare on Elm Street. If you enjoyed this episode, I am going to cover all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, so you know when the next one's coming out. If you could, give this video a like, because it gets the video out to other people. It greatly helps out the channel. And again, if you are listening this far, thank you so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. And until next time.